have our esteemed panelists, Stephen Gong, Joanne Lee, and Hui Leung, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. What do you do, and how are you connected to Chinatown? Do you want to start with Hui?
Hello everyone. My name is Hui. I'm the curator and deputy director at the Chinese Culture Center. So a lot of what I do in Chinatown is design art programming and work with artists. I do a mixture of artist development, meaning that I help artists orient themselves into working and contributing to this neighborhood. And yeah.
Hi everyone. Hi everyone. Again, I'm Joanne Lee. I'm the director here at Edge on the Square. So here we are in the heart of Chinatown on Grant Avenue, nestled right between Portsmouth Square, the living room of Chinatown, and Stockton Street, the bustling Market Street here. We are an arts and cultural hub with many different programs of visual arts and different kinds of activations, including our annual Contemporary Arts Festival. Prior to coming to Edge on the Square, I worked at Chinatown Community Development Center with Gordon. So I've spent many years in community development and now working with arts and culture here.
Good evening, everyone. Ooh, mine really works. You want to share this, Joanne? I'm Stephen Gong. I am the executive director of the Center for Asian American Media. And one of the things we do is we are putting on the annual Asian American Film Festival, now called CAMFest, and it starts on May 9th. So thank you. We're interested in elevating stories by and about Asian Americans. But to answer your question, I'm also currently the chair of the board of the Chinatown Media and Arts Collaborative, and I hope in some ways we'll be able to connect what we're doing in this space and trying to talk about the future of Chinatown.
So that's a good segue, actually, Stephen, if you want to talk about what is the role of media, since you straddle media and is also on the board of CMAC.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to reflect on these amazing images. The children we saw some excerpts from Bean Sprouts by Loni Ding, if you read the program notes. And this was a series of 5 half hours that Loni did as part of a whole effort to really provide images for young Chinese Americans, and actually for all of the young people that were living in the city at the time. And it really was an educational enterprise that she had. But one of the important things she felt was that one needed to see yourself in media, right? To validate your experience. And in a way, what I wanted to mention, her own daughter is in that footage, and all of those young people we saw in that footage are probably now in their late 50s. So you can kind of mark a bit of the time, but isn't it remarkable how similar, right, Chinatown still was at that point? And then we've been reminded, Faye, if I could also mention this, a number of folks have stepped forward to remind us that the Chinatown Rebels is a movement that started probably in the 1850s, soon after the first Chinese arrived here, because it's baked into our community all of these same issues, right? Of who we are, how we fit in here, and what does that mean. So I wanted to acknowledge that even if we celebrate a moment when the making of images, for moving images, became more readily available, that you saw a generation wanting to capture some of these issues that had been around for generations. So one of the things I feel is that it's wonderful to see young people here again and to see Shirley's film, which is really dealing with the same things, that each generation has to find its way. And now what we understand, this is something that most of us in the United States have to grapple with. What kind of society do we live in? What kind of society do we want to build, and how do we relate to one another? I'll stop there.
Well, I'm going to ask a young person sitting next to me.
That's nice of people.
What do you see in those films that you can relate to today, looking through your young eyes?
As a young person who speaks on behalf of all the young people visit to Chinatown, to be frank, I wish I have a working memory of that time, really, and it helps me to really understand the ethos of what Chinese people had gone through just by existing in the US. I think something that was extremely resonating to me was just how pervasive the Grant Avenue narrative has been and will always be, and it's not something that we can shake off. After the 1906 earthquake, the Chinatown community, in particular, the merchant class, have really wanted to keep Chinatown where it's at after the earthquake and the Great Fire. And so in that moment, Chinatown almost like put on a costume and kind of said something along the lines of, and this is where I'm projecting my own interpretation of what had happened, something along the lines of, if white people had always pointed their gaze at us, so why don't we make some profit off of that? Why don't we make it, something that we can be empowered by? So that's how I interpret the moment where Chinatown got its looks. And I think this is not an issue that has been reinvented or re-dealt with in a long, long time. And I think so much of what Grant Avenue and what San Francisco Chinatown looked like contributed to how people saw Chinese-ness. But I do want to remind people that even before Chinatown had looked like that, people were coming into Chinatown and exoticizing it. And that was the time that, even during the first World Exposition in San Francisco, they were looking at Chinese, opium dens, and, look at how the Chinese slum lived. And so, so I see the point of needing to reinvent that image, right? Precisely knowing that white people will keep looking at you the way they look at you. So what's next? So that is really the question. So when I saw bean sprouts for the first time, when I saw Dupont Guy for the first time, I really thought about those issues. I thought, during that conversation between the mother-daughter, I was like, wow, these are micro and macro aggression against Chinese people. And the mother's reaction was, it's okay, it's okay. But then the daughter was like, should I be angry? Should I not? I think we should be angry, right? And I think, Loni Ding dealt that card very, very accurately. And I think that reaction or that non-reaction is such a Chinese American feeling, minor feeling, et cetera, right? Such a Chinese American feeling that I really related to, the film that you all just saw, and just, working in Chinatown and reacting to tourists, residents, and all the issues that are, intersecting with each other. That was really my main takeaway.
Awesome. So, Joanne, you're literally working in some place that is on Grant Avenue, and I think you're surrounded by at least 8 tourist shops. How does this corner function relative to that context?
Yeah, thanks, Faye. We're in such a unique place, right? Because these shops around us keep changing. And certainly after the pandemic, many of them have changed. It used to be just filled with these souvenir shops, T-shirts and postcards and back scratchers, those kinds of really kind of nicky-nacky kind of little souvenirs. And they're slowly changing, as you're seeing. And I think it's to be seen as to how that really evolves. And so, you're seeing some not just Chinese-focused businesses. We're seeing some Japanese-focused businesses. I'm seeing some Korean-focused businesses, which, again, it's kind of that changing sort of Asian community that's here. And I think with having an arts organization kind of has people stop and say, oh, this is really different, right? You're not selling something. We're a free space. People can come in and, take their time and see, look at the exhibitions and interact with them, come into our programming. In a few years, Chinese Culture Center will be 2 blocks down, and sorry if I stole your thunder. The two organizations are really going to be these cultural anchors here on Grant Avenue, and I think that continues to change how this used to be much more of a tourist, place. People would come and again buy those souvenirs, have a little Chinese food, and I'm really hoping that that experience starts to really expand people's time here and that they come back for more.
Thank you, Joanne. So I'm going to ask Gordon a question now. I'm going to give you the mic.
Sure.
So the question to you, Gordon. Hello, everybody. This is Gordon Chin. So Gordon, in watching these films, what kinds of thoughts do you have about what you fought for Chinatown and what you saw in those films, and as you walk around Chinatown and talk to folks, are the same issues that you see now, and where do you think that's going to lead to?
Thank you, Faye. I don't know whether history repeats itself, but as been said, this is the first Chinatown in the country, in the history of the country. I tell my younger activists, like Tan Chow, that was working on housing, evictions, what have you, that we were not the first activists to proclaim we won't move. The first activist who said that was right after the 1906 earthquake, where the city wanted to move Chinatown out to Hunters Point because this land was too valuable for Chinese. So those leaders, those activists said, we won't move. And we've been saying that ever since. So I think the spirit of activism, of solidarity, of belonging in this country has been with us since the very beginning, despite the fact that other people don't think we belong, and other governments don't think we belong. In a micro sense, the fact that we are here, as Joanne said, is very, very important in the history of our community and the history of our movement. Faye asked me earlier, well, what's the difference between Chinatown in the 1970s and now? And I don't think there's that much difference. Culturally, I mean, oh, by the way, I don't ride a motorcycle. Curtis Choy could not get any of the gang kids to be in the film because they were afraid that the cops would see it. So Curtis asked me to do that scene. Okay. Because I look good. Chinatown has always been sort of a dichotomy of defining a place for ourselves and defining what it should be for whoever came to Chinatown. And it's difficult because that could include tourists, government, family, what have you. But there is a survival instinct and a flexibility to adapt. And that doesn't mean sell out. It means to adapt given economic conditions, political conditions, what have you. I'm here with my partner, Dorothy, who is not going to want me to say this, but when we were at State College during the strike, Dorothy and some of the activists back then, for recreation, they would walk up and down Grant Avenue following tourists, yelling at them, get out of Chinatown. Actually, they said, get out of Chinatown, white man. But that was sort of the attitude, right? We wanted to protect this place from those white tourists. Well, I think these are a little different now, because tourism is an important part of this economy, right? So perspective, how we integrate that with a local economy that serves residents. We learned a lot in the 60s and 70s, but we had to learn it again in the last few years. I retired. I don't know if I could do this job today, But in many ways, what's happening over the last 4 or 5 years is very reminiscent of what was happening in the 60s and 70s, as my good friends Esther and Steve know very well. At that time, let's say 1970, Chinatown was dealing with all kinds of shit. There was the gang wars, 30-something murders, immigration and immigrants who were not being served by a school system that did not support bilingual education, an underserved economy. So all that stuff was part of the identity of Chinatown back then. And sort of a mixed perception of how, what the tourist economy would mean. But on the other hand, you had a number of new institutions getting started. Nonprofits, the Cultural Center, Chinatown CDC. I don't know if Cam was around then, but Chinese confirmed that. So you had new nonprofit organizations getting started and moving from protest to institutional. I've seen in the last 5 years, even though I'm retired, how folks have dealt with COVID, anti-Asian violence, downturn in the economy, the tourist economy tanking. People still have hope. I have great hope because of what I've seen in terms of reactions has been just wonderful. And in fact, even better than the reaction in the 60s and 70s. Because finally, with groups like Edge of the Square, the API Council, folks are working together now more than they ever have. And working with the business community, right? Working with the tourist economy. So I don't know what all that means, but I think there is a desire for collaboration and less finger pointing than there has been in the past. And we'll see whether that holds true. But I think it's a wonderful time in the history of this community. And I wouldn't be anywhere else. Thanks.
And I'll come back to you, so don't go away. I want to give some time for the audience Q&A, but I'm going to ask 2 questions to all 4 of you. We want to kind of look into the future of Chinatown and Grant Avenue, but it's kind of vexing to me because who gets to say what the future of Chinatown should be? A lot of Chinese American, Asian Americans, mixed race Asians don't live in Chinatown. They love Chinatown, but they live in Richmond, they live in Vallejo, they come to Chinatown, it's still their heart. Do they get a say? And also, why preserve Chinatown at all? Who wants to go first? Stephen?
Yeah, this is I have to raise money all the time talking about this. So. I naturally respond. The CAM, when it was known as NATA, and we started at about this time, and it was 44 years ago. I was but a child then, but the idea was pretty simple in a way. It was that we have to tell our own stories, right? Because if you don't, somebody else is going to tell your story, and you saw what that was like. That's what the Dupont Guy film, in a way, is. It's the schizophrenia of this interpretation of your reality, and then you have to grapple and fill in. I think we have, with the generosity of spirit or with recognition, we have to recognize that this is the case for every other community that is part of this country and part of the world. And if in the United States the default was a white Christian paradigm, that's been called into question. And it's a contested place right now. And I think our experience in this space of Chinatown, you know, is 100 and what, starting to come close to 200 years of a different understanding. And I think Chinatown surviving like this, all of the work that we all do, wherever we go, has to be informed by that experience, that collective experience. We need to, continually live our lives, connect with our past, connect with our history to the present, projecting into the future, but also allow and understand that other communities need to play that same role. That to me is that shorthand of where we need to be headed as a culture, as a nation, and really as a global community that really needs to solve some existential problems. Okay, was that good enough?
Wow, that was pretty big. I'll take it in a little bit of a different direction. I mean, when I think about Chinatown and preserving, this is better, and
You want to use my mic? Yes.
and, you know, not necessarily, you know, preserving Chinatown, saving Chinatown. I mean, first of all, it is people's homes, right? This is where people live. This is where people grow up. They raise their families here, right? They go to school here. This is a community. So to me, that's like first and foremost. Like, of course you keep it thriving. It is a thriving community. And how do we kind of keep that going forward? So I think that's where we start. To continue to push for an equitable community, and that includes everyone having a voice about what that looks like, and certainly a place where I think arts are essential as part of that, in addition to affordable housing and open space and access to, healthy foods and transportation and education and employment. But the arts has to be a centerpiece of that with everything else, because it really is the social connector for people, and to gather together and to celebrate culture, learn from history, and it is bringing people together. And artists and cultural workers are a part of that. They're really a key part of bringing together, I think, multidisciplinary solutions to some of our big problems. And they're really, I'm finding, artists are the ones that are really able to look at cross-sector solutions, with our urban planners and, and our community development people. But it takes the creativity of that as part of that. Sorry.
Yeah, let's see. So I was born in Hong Kong, grew up in San Francisco, grew up in the Sunset District, and came to work in Chinatown. So in so many ways, I am an outsider to this community, that I feel like at the same time, Chinatown is really the only place I can do what I can do, or what I think I can do. In some strange way, I feel like I belong the most here. Maybe it's because of its rebellious nature, maybe it's because of its subversiveness, or maybe it's because of its value system that really affirms who I am, whatever that means. The reason, by virtue of existing and by virtue of existing forever, Chinatown represents something that is so, so defiant of that white Christian force. And kind of referencing back to what Gordon was saying, that so much has changed in Chinatown, and yet so much has not changed. And I think that's very poignant because I look at culture and I look at the way culture should evolve and should develop. So sometimes I do think about why hasn't things changed, right? And it maybe perhaps it's because of those forces, or maybe because of Chinese people were really trying to assimilate into American culture. It striked out some of the possibility of Chinese culture to be practiced in its very fullest in the US context. So with all of these things combined, this is where I feel like my intervention is in this neighborhood, is precisely that cultural development. What is the evolution of artists? What's the evolution of culture in Chinatown. My definition of preservation is to allow whatever that's there to continue practicing itself and to continue to evolve. In no way things can stay static, and I think that's the only way to get through it. So whatever that means, that's the only way to get through it, and I'm pretty, persistent about that. So that's why I think Chinatown should exist forever and ever, and that's why I think, that's how I think we could attempt to preserve it. Yeah.
I agree. If you think you belong here, you belong here. And there's no one going to tell you whether you should belong or not. And I think over time, we've been told by all kind of folks, politicians, folks who live in other cities, folks in other neighborhoods, what we should do in Chinatown or what Chinatown should be. Alternative viewpoints are all valid, as long as they are articulated respectfully, and we should reciprocate, because none of us have the crystal ball about what the future of this place should be, right? And what our role is in this country. My friends in New York Chinatown, for a while they had this strategic plan that was subtitled America's Chinatown, and all of us here in San Francisco had a kick out of that one. But we have seen too much infighting within our communities. Other cities happy that Chinatown is losing out on banquet business. The Richmond and Sunset rejoicing in the downturn of Chinatown. But that's a zero-sum game, right? We have to be able to dialogue, struggle, and fight respectfully, right? Even in the last few weeks, there's been this dispute right on Grant Avenue between some of the merchants and the lion dance troops, or whether to close off Grant Avenue for cultural activities, right? That's a legitimate debate. How many days should Chinatown, Grant Avenue be closed down? Once a month, once a week, permanently? You've talked to some environmentalists who I know. They think Grant Avenue should be a pedestrian mall, no cars at all. We need to respect other opinions who are coming to the surface. They all have a vision for this place, and we need to put all that together, and try to come to some consensus, because this is the only place we have, and we can't spend our time fighting with each other.
Thank you, Gordon. That was exactly right. So who's going to be the planner that's going to convene the community organizing around that? Not me. I think we have some time for audience questions. I mean, it's clear that the representation of Asian Americans and Chinese Americans and San Francisco Chinese really sets the context in which we get to decide what we want. Fighting stereotypes is like just a part of it, but it's a really big part of it. And to be empowered to determine our own identity and our future takes media, takes arts and culture, takes community development, takes planning, takes politics, takes all of you to come out and be in conversation. So I really appreciate it. I'm buying time for audience questions. Anyone? Okay. You want to come up here? The microphone is not here. It's as far as.
Okay. My question is just about the first film, Fortune. Is the director here? Okay. My question was just, why is it in black and white? Like, yeah, what's your...
So this film is made at Stanford. I'm right now finishing up my MFA at Stanford University, documentary MFA. Yes, and the first assignment was to shoot a 5-minute film on a Bolex camera with 5 rolls of 16mm film. And the film that they gave to us was in black and white. So everything was developed into black and white. I basically didn't have a choice. But at the same time, if I were to choose, if I were to film it in black and white or color, I think I would choose black and white as well. There is the texture of black and white images that make you really look at the images. And I want that to be like something that the audience is looking at. Like I want them to pay attention to what they're seeing. Something I heard in the Dupont Guy film is like what we see, images that we see. And that's something that I also want to reflect upon in my film is what are the things that we see in Chinatown and what are the things that we don't see or what we can't see. And that's also another reason why I'm glad that they give us the opportunity to shoot with film. There's that witnessing and like documentation with the medium itself. And thank you so much for organizing this event and inviting my film to be screened. It's amazing.
Are you able to walk up? Are you able to walk up here? Sorry.
That's okay. I'm born and raised here, so I've seen a lot in Chinatown, and this is the first time I've seen the whole thing about Asian Chinese in such fraction. And I want to know now, at this time, how do you propose making that change for the other Chinatown, and also the immigrant? We have different ways of immigrating. You have people who are separated. I'm not from your Chinatown. I would never go to your Chinatown because your Chinatown's dirty, or you're my Chinatown. How do you propose moving forward with the Center of Progressing and Unifying those Chinatown as well as many other communities that we're, right now, there's too many divisions.
No, I wasn't. I was trying to hide it. Okay. No, thankfully, this is not the job I'm in, so I think we're in a particular moment. I mean, I think the larger stuff that's going on in our society is telling us that this is a watershed kind of moment, I think, in the life of the country. And all I can say is that the question you raise, we have to learn how to find common ground. I mean, if we don't, speaking of the kind of Chinatown experience that I spoke about earlier, there's not a lot of hope, really, for the rest of the experiment, of the American experiment. It has to be based on the commonality that one sees, no matter the background. It was like that. It is like the moment in Bean Sprouts of the family conversation. It is right to be angry about the way others see you if you feel that pain. But I think we have to have those difficult conversations. I think that's why we are social creatures. It's why we tend to find storytelling and other arts experiences to stand in and help us arrive at that conversation.
Always hard questions, Esther. One of the things Gordon used to always say, I don't know if you remember, about finding common ground is that if you take the time to listen, you'll find that we have more in common than we don't. And I think that's part of trying to bring people together, finding ways that, you know, we come together, we are able to have a conversation, share a meal or something that starts to, you know, break down those walls and just getting to know people, you know, as humans.
So Thank you for thinking that we have an answer to this question. I feel deeply honored to be asked, actually. I don't know, China's a construction. So something that happened last week was we opened the first Chinese queer museum in Ross Alley. And that was featuring an activist who founded the first grassroots lesbian organization in Shanghai for 20 years, and now she's in America, right? And now she is part of our Chinese diasporic community. So I think Chinese-ness has always been a very fractioned identity. And I think knowing that and coming, programming with that understanding gives me hope too. Because what happened during the opening was that we have, what we call young Asian American, we have the new Chinese immigrant residents of Chinatown. We have the, third generation Chinese American who came and supported the program unconditionally and addressing, the themes of, queer identity and LGBT activism. For me, that was like a little slice of utopia of what, what the world can be, right? So I lean in on those moments of trying to understand precisely what made it work and what, how it made me feel as someone who's, born in Hong Kong and grew up here and still navigating some sort of identity crisis and still navigating multiple identity crises within your own family and within your own community as well. I think there's more solidarity than we think, and I think I don't underestimate our ability to stretch and go beyond what we think we are as labels and boxes and people. So I'm hopeful. So I think I can just generally say I am hopeful. I don't think it's impossible. We need a lot more resources to do this stuff. That's all.
Thank you for asking that question. I feel compelled to answer even though I'm a moderator. Am I allowed to?
Of course.
So as humans, we're actually really fluid, and we actually mesh more than we're divided, and the division is actually a construct by the system that we're in because it exploits us in that way. I don't really talk about this in this way very much, but I feel very strongly because I'm of Chinese descent from Indonesia, and the reason why we came to the United States is because we were Chinese and we were persecuted and discriminated against and murdered. But it wasn't because people hated each other, it was because the Dutch colonial system was very smart in dividing and conquering. It is a very conscious decision, and now it's subconscious, and within the system wins when we're divided. So if you think about it as something that's unnatural, that is put upon us, it's very easy to see it everywhere, and it's not part of you. So thank you for letting me have that platform.
Hi, I'm bored here, but I want to give you some inside information on the Schiz of Grant Ave so that the images that are still fresh in your mind, you maybe make some connections. So in the beginning, Gordon's on a Honda. It's not a Harley. It looks like a Harley. The opening shot was Chris Chow. He was the first Chinese American reporter on KPIX. And there were shots of the Eggman delivering eggs. That's Chris's father. He lived to 100 years old. And there's also a shot of the postal worker in the mail, in the post office. That's Curtis Choy's father. And there's a cameo of Curtis, if you don't know what he looks like. He's doing an interview with someone in the street, okay? And I did the sound, but I don't remember what I recorded. And so those images, when you think about how this came together, this was before image stabilization. There was no such thing as a CD or a DVD. There was no such thing as a cell phone. It was done on 16 millimeter film, and audio was a 1/4 inch tape. You can imagine what that looks like. So it gives you a little idea of what went behind that. And I think for the producer of Fortune, the question I have is, when did you start to do the filming? What year?
When I started as a filmmaker, 2019.
2019. Okay, so that just when the pandemic started to hit. Okay, all right. Because I was interested in the images. And Curtis's film was done in the early 70s. So the technology between his film and what you used was pretty similar. So if there wasn't a date on there, you would think that they were made in the same era. So that, I just want to share that.
That's a really great point. Film is a wonderful medium. Any last thoughts? This is a great convening and really nice conversation about, I think, the identity of Chinatown that's ever changing. It's going to change a lot really soon, you know? The financial district is in dire straits and it's just right there. So whatever the city's going to do next, they're probably going to do something that may or may not help Chinatown, and we're going to have to figure out what that is. Anything else? All right, well, that's it. Thank you so much.